All right, so let's dive into this Volkswagen thing.
Yeah.
Emissions scandal.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everybody remembers the headlines.
Right.
Volkswagen got caught rigging their cars to
Ah.
cheat on those emissions tests.
Yep.
But we're going deeper than that in this deep dive.
For sure.
We've got a bunch of sources about how this all happened in the first place.
Absolutely.
And we're going to see if maybe Volkswagen's drive to be number one
Yeah.
pushed them over an ethical cliff.
It's really interesting because they weren't just aiming for success.
Right.
They were obsessed with being the top automaker in the world by 2018.
Oh, wow.
That kind of ambition, that can create immense pressure.
Yeah, I bet.
And as we'll see, that pressure played a key role in this whole thing.
Okay, so let's rewind back to when the scandal first broke.
Okay.
Michael Horn, Volkswagen's U.S. CEO,
Right.
tried to blame it on just a few rogue engineers
Yeah.
acting alone.
Mhm.
That's like the classic.
Just following orders.
Just following orders defense. But that's not really what the sources say, is it?
No, not at all.
What do they say?
Hans-Dieter Pooch, Volkswagen's chairman,
Okay.
he admitted to a chain of errors
Wow.
and a culture of rule breaking that went way beyond just a handful of engineers.
So this is a much bigger problem
Oh, yeah.
than just a few bad apples.
For sure.
But were the top executives really in the dark?
Well, that's the question, right?
Yeah.
Investigators were grappling with that.
Right.
There were a lot of allegations that top execs, including the former CEO, Martin Winterkorn,
Okay.
were aware of the deception,
Oh, wow.
and they may have even authorized the cover-up.
That changes things significantly.
It does.
Makes you wonder how much pressure employees were under
Right.
to achieve those ambitious goals.
A lot of pressure.
Yeah.
The sources described the corporate culture back then as incredibly demanding,
Yeah.
almost like a pressure cooker.
Wow.
Employees felt like they had to deliver no matter what
Mhm.
to meet those market goals.
It's like, do whatever it takes.
Yeah, do whatever it takes was the unspoken motto.
Even if it meant crossing ethical lines.
It seems so, yeah.
So how do they do it?
Well, these defeat devices,
Okay.
they were incredibly sophisticated.
Right.
They could actually detect when a car was undergoing an emissions test
Oh, wow.
and activate the emissions controls just for that scenario.
Hmm.
But in real-world driving, those controls were off.
So they're intentionally polluting.
Yeah, way more than regulations allowed.
It's hard to believe that the engineers didn't see the ethical implications.
Well, it's not always as simple as people consciously choosing to do something wrong.
Right.
You know, our sources suggest that some employees may have looked to the past
Okay.
and saw that, similar tactics,
Right.
while ethically questionable,
Yeah.
hadn't resulted in any serious consequences.
So they figured they could get away with it again.
Maybe.
It's a dangerous assumption to make,
It is.
especially with something that could have such huge environmental and health impacts.
For sure. And we also have to remember that Volkswagen was operating in a very competitive industry.
Right.
They might have convinced themselves that everybody else was bending the rules too.
So they had to do the same to keep up.
That's right.
But does that really justify breaking the law?
Of course not. And that's where Volkswagen's leadership really failed.
Okay.
They should have made it crystal clear that achieving goals
Right.
could never come at the expense of ethics.
But they didn't.
No, they fostered this culture of winning at all costs,
Mm.
which created an environment where this kind of rationalization could flourish.
Speaking of leadership, what about the employees that actually installed these devices? Were
Yeah.
they just blindly following orders?
It's probably a mix of both.
Okay.
Some might have truly believed they were acting in the best interest of the company,
Right.
even if it meant bending the rules.
Yeah.
Others might have felt pressured to comply,
Right.
fearing for their jobs if they spoke up. The leadership style was described as very autocratic,
Yeah.
meaning that employees might have assumed their actions were tacitly approved.
By the higher up.
By the higher-ups, yeah.
Even if it was never explicitly stated.
That's right.
But I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Installing devices to cheat on emissions tests is a blatant ethical violation.
Yeah, there's no way around that.
What's particularly troubling is that Volkswagen lacked a speak-up culture,
Exactly.
like an environment where employees feel safe raising concerns.
Without fear of retaliation.
Is that fair retaliation, right?
They didn't have anonymous reporting systems,
Oh, wow.
and whistleblowers often faced backlash.
So if you saw something shady,
You'd keep your mouth shut.
you'd keep your mouth shut.
Yeah.
So what happened to the employees who were directly involved?
Well, some engineers actually faced criminal charges
Oh, wow.
and went to prison
Wow.
for their role in the scandal.
Wow.
Others lost their jobs, even if they weren't directly involved.
It's like a ripple effect.
Yeah, it created a ripple effect of consequences throughout the company.
It sounds like the company prioritized profits over principles
It does.
and then scrambled to cover their tracks when things went wrong.
Right.
What's really unsettling is that it makes you wonder what's happening behind closed doors
At other companies.
at other companies.
Absolutely.
If Volkswagen could stoop to this, who's to say others aren't doing similar things?
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
It highlights the broader impact of this scandal.
Right.
It wasn't just Volkswagen that suffered consequences.
Right.
Their actions triggered a wave of investigations
Across the whole automotive industry.
across the whole industry. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Revealing that other automakers were also playing fast and loose with emissions.
Mm-hmm.
It forced a reckoning across the whole sector.
So Volkswagen's actions didn't just backfire on them.
Right.
They had ripple effects throughout the entire industry.
They did.
It's a reminder that ethical lapses can have far-reaching consequences,
Absolutely.
even beyond the company itself.
They can.
So did Volkswagen try to sweep this whole thing under the rug?
Well, they couldn't ignore it.
Yeah.
The fallout was too big.
Right.
But whether they truly learned from their mistakes
That's a good question.
is a question we'll explore further in part 2 of this deep dive.
Okay, so stay tuned.
Yeah, we're just getting started.
We'll be back. So Volkswagen really messed up.
Yeah, big time.
But what happened after the scandal broke?
Well, they couldn't exactly ignore it, right?
Right.
The fallout was massive.
Yeah.
Billions in fines,
Oh, yeah.
legal battles.
Mm-hmm.
The reputation was destroyed.
Yeah, at that point, it wasn't just about emissions anymore, was it?
No.
It was about trust. Consumers felt betrayed.
Uh-huh.
Investors were spooked. How do you even come back from something like that?
It's a long road back, for sure.
Yeah.
Volkswagen took a number of steps to address what happened.
Like what?
Well, they restructured their leadership team,
Okay.
brought in new executives
Okay.
who seemed committed to ethical conduct
Okay.
and transparency.
Mm-hmm.
They overhauled their compliance programs,
Hmm.
implemented stricter controls and audits.
To prevent future misconduct?
Yeah.
Okay. And what else?
They invested heavily in electric vehicles,
Really?
positioning themselves as a leader in sustainable transportation.
So it's like a corporate mea culpa
Yeah.
coupled with a big push towards a greener image.
Right.
Was it all just a PR stunt?
It's hard to say for sure what was going on in their minds,
Yeah.
but from what we see in these sources,
Yeah.
it seems like they knew they needed a fundamental shift in their culture.
Because the problem wasn't just the defeat devices, right?
No.
It was the culture that allowed it to happen in the first place.
Exactly.
A culture that seemed to prioritize results
Uh-huh.
over ethical considerations.
Absolutely. And changing a company's culture is really hard.
I bet.
It's not like flipping a switch.
Right.
It requires a sustained effort from the top down.
To like reshape values and behaviors.
Exactly.
So what does that look like in practice?
Well, for Volkswagen,
Yeah.
it involved a number of things.
Okay.
They implemented mandatory ethics training
Okay.
for all employees,
Wow.
focused on things like compliance,
Mm.
whistleblowing,
Yeah.
and responsible decision-making.
Right.
They created new channels for reporting concerns anonymously.
So no fear of retaliation.
Right.
Right.
And they started publicly emphasizing sustainability and environmental responsibility.
Trying to rebuild trust.
Yeah, with consumers and regulators.
It sounds like they were hitting the reset button.
They were.
Both internally and externally.
Uh-huh.
But did it work?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And honestly, only time can really answer that.
Right.
They've definitely made progress,
Okay.
and they've avoided any major scandals since then.
That's good.
But some critics argue that it's all just for show, a way to rehab their image without addressing the deeper issues.
It's interesting that they poured so much money into electric vehicles. It aligns with their commitment to sustainability.
It does.
But some people might see that as a distraction
Yeah.
from their past transgressions
Kind of greenwashing.
to make them look more environmentally friendly.
Yeah, there's definitely some skepticism out there,
I bet.
and rightfully so.
Right.
It's going to take more than just fancy electric cars to fully regain trust.
Right.
They need to show a consistent commitment to ethical conduct over the long term.
It makes you think about the impact of ethical lapses.
It does.
Even if a company recovers financially and legally,
Uh-huh.
that damage to their reputation can last for years?
It can. It becomes part of their story.
A cautionary tale.
A cautionary tale, exactly.
So Volkswagen's story is a lesson for other companies.
Absolutely.
About the importance of ethics.
It is.
But it's also relevant to us as individuals, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
No matter what industry we work in,
Right.
how do we navigate these ethical dilemmas that we all face?
That's a big question.
It's easy to say, do the right thing,
Yeah.
but it's not always clear what that means, is it?
No, it's not.
It's one thing to talk about ethics theoretically,
Yeah.
but it's different when you're faced with a real-life dilemma,
For sure.
especially when your job might be on the line.
It's true.
What do you do if your boss asks you to do something shady,
Right.
but you're worried about speaking up?
Yeah.
Or what if you see a colleague cutting corners?
Mm.
These situations can be really tough.
They can. And that's why it's so important to have a framework for ethical decision-making.
Okay, so it's like a mental checklist.
Yeah, like a checklist to run through when you're in a difficult situation.
I like that.
Yeah.
So what's on this ethical checklist?
Well, first and foremost, trust your gut.
Okay.
If something feels wrong, it probably is.
Right.
But intuition alone isn't always enough.
Okay.
Sometimes we need to think things through more carefully.
So what should we be thinking about?
One helpful framework is to consider the consequences of your actions.
Okay.
Who will be affected by my decision? And how will anyone be harmed?
Yeah.
Will it violate any laws or ethical principles?
So it's like weighing the pros and cons
It is, but with an ethical lens.
with an ethical lens, right?
Right.
What else should we consider?
Another important step is to gather information.
Okay.
Don't jump to conclusions.
Right.
Talk to colleagues you trust,
Okay.
or mentors,
Mm-hmm.
research company policies,
Mm.
consult relevant laws or regulations.
So the more informed you are, the better.
Exactly.
You're arming yourself with knowledge
Right.
so you can make an informed decision
That's right.
and not just react emotionally.
Exactly. And remember, you don't have to go it alone.
Okay.
Talk to others,
Right.
especially people with more experience.
You get their perspective.
Yeah, get a reality check.
It's like having a sounding board.
It is.
What if you've done all that,
How-
weighed the consequences,
Uh-huh.
gathered information,
Right.
talked to people you trust,
Okay.
and you still feel like something is wrong?
Then it's time to speak up.
Okay.
This is where courage comes in.
Yeah.
It might feel uncomfortable,
Right.
even risky,
I bet.
but it's crucial to voice your concerns.
Okay. So how do you do that?
Well, start by talking to your supervisor.
Okay.
If that doesn't work
Yeah.
or doesn't feel safe,
Right.
consider going to higher levels.
Like HR
Yeah,
or a compliance officer.
exactly.
But what if you're worried about retaliation?
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
Sadly, it does happen.
It's scary.
It is. That's why it's important to document everything.
Okay.
Emails, conversations, anything.
Anything that supports your concerns.
Right.
Okay.
And familiarize yourself with your company's whistleblower protection policies.
Right.
A lot of companies have ways to protect employees who report misconduct.
So it's not just about speaking up.
Right.
It's about doing it strategically
Yes.
and protecting yourself.
Exactly. And remember, you're not just doing this for yourself.
Okay.
You're potentially protecting the organization.
From bigger problems.
Yeah. From bigger problems down the road.
So you're contributing to a more ethical workplace.
You are.
That's an important point.
It is.
It's easy to focus on self-preservation,
It is.
but speaking up can be an act of service,
Right.
both to the company
Mm-hmm.
and to everyone.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's even a legal requirement.
That's right.
Like for accountants and lawyers,
Yeah.
they have to report certain types of misconduct. So ethical conduct isn't just about personal values. It's
Right.
also about legal and professional responsibilities.
It is.
We might never be in these situations,
Hopefully not.
but it's good to be prepared.
It is. Think of it like a fire drill.
Okay.
You might never need it,
Yeah.
but it's good to know what to do if
Right.
the alarm goes off.
So let's recap.
Okay.
You're facing an ethical dilemma.
Uh-huh.
Trust your gut,
Okay.
weigh the consequences,
Right.
gather information,
Uh-huh.
talk to trusted advisors,
Yeah.
and if necessary, speak up.
That's right.
And you don't have to do it alone.
No,
There are resources to help you.
there are.
Ethical decision-making is a skill
It is.
that gets better with practice.
Like anything else.
The more we exercise it, the better we get.
Exactly.
And the Volkswagen scandal reminds us that ethical lapses have huge consequences.
They do.
Not just for individuals, but for everyone.
For organizations and for society as a whole.
Right.
It's a lesson we can all learn from.
It is. We've spent all this time talking about Volkswagen, uncovering their culture, and what happened afterward. But let's bring it home.
Okay.
How do we as individuals navigate those tricky ethical situations that pop up at work?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, it's easy to say do the right thing, but it's not always clear what that means in the moment.
No, it's not.
It's one thing to talk about ethics in theory.
Right.
But it's a whole other ballgame when you're faced with a real dilemma.
Absolutely.
Especially when your job might be at stake.
That's true.
Like, what do you do when your boss asks you to do something shady?
Yeah.
But you're worried about speaking up.
Right.
Or you see a colleague cutting corners, but you don't want to be a tattletale.
Yeah, those situations are tough.
They are really tough.
It's important to have a framework.
A framework?
Yeah, for ethical decision-making.
Okay, so like a mental checklist.
Yeah, like a checklist to run through.
When you're in a sticky situation.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. So what's on the checklist?
Well, first and foremost, trust your gut.
Okay.
If something feels wrong, it probably is.
Right.
But our gut feeling isn't always enough.
Okay.
Sometimes we need to think it through more carefully.
Okay, so what should we be thinking about?
One helpful way to think about it is to consider the consequences of your actions. Who will be affected?
Yeah.
And how will anyone be harmed?
Right.
Will it violate any laws or ethical principles?
It's like weighing the pros and cons.
Yeah, but with an ethical lens.
With ethical lens, right?
Yeah.
Okay, what else?
Another important step is to gather information.
Okay.
Don't jump to conclusions based on assumptions.
Right.
Talk to colleagues.
Okay.
Or mentors, people you trust. Do some research.
Right.
Read company policies.
Okay.
Look up relevant laws.
So the more informed you are, the better.
Exactly.
It's like you're arming yourself with knowledge so you can make a good decision.
An informed decision.
An informed decision, right?
Not just an emotional reaction.
Right. Not just an emotional reaction.
Yeah.
And we don't have to do this alone.
You don't know.
We can talk to others.
Yes.
Get their perspective.
Especially people with more experience.
People who have been there before.
Right. They can help you see things more clearly.
It's like having a sounding board.
It is.
But what if you've done all that?
Yeah.
Weighed the consequences. Gathered information.
Right.
Talk to people. Okay. And you still feel like something is wrong. Then it's time to speak up. But that takes courage.
It does, yeah.
It can feel scary.
It can feel risky.
Yeah.
But it's so important to voice those concerns.
Okay, so how do you do that?
Well, first, try talking to your supervisor.
Okay.
Or your manager.
Right.
If that doesn't feel safe.
Yeah.
Or if it doesn't lead to a resolution.
Right.
You can think about escalating it.
Going higher up.
Yeah, like to HR.
Okay.
Or a compliance officer.
What if you're worried about retaliation?
I understand that's a valid concern.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it does happen.
It's a scary thought.
It is. That's why it's so important to document everything.
Everything.
Yeah, emails, conversations, any evidence.
That supports your concerns.
Exactly.
Okay.
And get familiar with your company's policies.
About whistleblowers.
About whistleblowers, yeah.
So there are things in place to protect people.
A lot of companies have mechanisms, yes.
So it's not just about speaking up.
No.
It's about doing it strategically.
It is.
And protecting yourself.
You got it.
And it's not just about us either.
Yeah.
It's about protecting the organization.
From bigger problems.
Yeah, down the road.
You're contributing to a more ethical workplace.
That's a good point.
It is.
It's easy to get caught up in self-preservation.
It is.
But speaking up can be bigger than that.
It can be an act of service.
To the company.
Yeah.
And to the community.
To the whole community, absolutely.
And sometimes speaking up is even required by law.
That's right.
Like for accountants and lawyers.
Certain professions have mandatory reporting obligations.
So ethics isn't just about personal values.
Right.
It's about professional responsibilities, too.
Absolutely.
Hopefully we never find ourselves in these situations.
Hopefully not.
But it's good to be prepared.
It is.
It's like a fire drill.
Exactly.
You might never need it.
Right.
But you need to know what to do.
If the alarm goes off.
If the alarm goes off.
Yeah.
So let's recap one last time.
Okay. You're facing an ethical dilemma. Trust your gut.
Okay.
Weigh those consequences. Gather information.
Right.
Talk to your trusted advisors.
Yep.
And if you have to, speak up.
Exactly.
And remember, you don't have to do it alone.
You don't.
There are resources to help.
There are.
And like anything else, the more we practice,
Yeah.
the better we get at making these decisions.
Ethical decision-making is a muscle
It is.
that gets stronger with use.
The Volkswagen scandal is a big reminder for all of us.
It is.
That ethical lapses have huge consequences.
They do.
Not just for companies,
Right.
but for everyone.
For everyone, yeah.
Well, that's about it for our deep dive into
Yeah.
the Volkswagen emissions scandal.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did.
From those defeat devices to the broader ethical implications.
It was a fascinating conversation.
It was.
And I hope everyone listening learned something.
I hope so too.
About corporate ethics and accountability.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this journey.
It was my pleasure.
We'll be back next time with another deep dive.
Sounds good.
Until then, stay curious, stay informed,
and stay ethical.
Stay ethical.